the misty dawn of Hillside Nature Reserve, a rescued bobcat named Maxine gave birth to 5 cubs, but the 5th emerged lifeless, a fragile ghost no one expected to survive. What happened next shocked the team. A scream from the vet, a mother's desperate howl, and a choice that could save one life or destroy them all. Was it a miracle of love or a reckless defiance of nature's cruel rules? Hit that subscribe button now and join our first 1,000 supporters to uncover the truth behind Maxine's fight. In the misty dawn of Hillside Nature Reserve, cradled by the rugged peaks of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, a rescued bobcat named Maxine gave birth to 5 cubs, but the 5th emerged lifeless, a fragile ghost no one expected to survive. What happened next shocked the team. A scream from the vet pierced the stillness, a mother's desperate howl echoed through the trees, and a choice loomed that could save one life or destroy them all. Was it a miracle of love or a reckless defiance of nature's cruel rules? Hit that subscribe button now and join our first 1,000 supporters to uncover the truth behind Maxine's fight. The air was thick with the scent of wet pine and wildflowers as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the 200-acre sanctuary. Maxine, a 4-year-old bobcat with tufted ears and amber eyes that burned with a wild intensity, lay on a weathered slab of granite in her enclosure. Her tawny fur, once matted and dull from years in a rusty cage at a Tennessee fur farm, now gleamed under the care of Hillside staff. But those eyes, they carried scars no one could see, a haunting memory of confinement and fear. Hillside wasn't just any nature reserve. It was the dream of Eleanor Grayson, a 72-year-old former biology professor who'd poured her life savings into this patch of wilderness 15 years ago. Her mission? To give broken creatures like Maxine a second chance. But her methods sparked fierce debate among conservationists. These animals belong in the wild, critics argued, their voices sharp on forums and podcasts. Keeping them here is a cage with better scenery. Eleanor, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, stood firm. "They've been too damaged by humans to survive out there," she'd say, her voice soft but unyielding. "If we don't intervene, who will?" Maxine's story began 2 years earlier, when authorities raided the illegal fur operation and found her cowering in a crate barely big enough to turn around in. Dr. Henry Sullivan, the reserve's 55-year-old veterinarian, remembered that day like a wound that wouldn't heal. His hands had trembled as he lifted her frail body from the cage, her ribs sharp under his fingers. Henry carried his own ghosts. 20 years ago, a fawn had died under his scalpel during his first surgery, a failure that cost him his marriage when his wife walked out, whispering, "You can't save them all." He'd vowed never to let it happen again. Lucas Hayes, a 34-year-old wildlife specialist with a rugged frame and a gentle soul, had been the one to coax Maxine back to life. Once a park ranger in a forest ravaged by logging, he'd watched helplessly as chainsaws stole homes from creatures he swore to protect. Hillside became his redemption, and Maxine his quiet triumph. Claire Donovan, the 29-year-old education coordinator, rounded out the core team. Raised in a city family indifferent to nature, she saw every rescued animal as a chance to atone for humanity's apathy. Together, they'd nursed Maxine through months of rehabilitation, watching her reclaim her instincts in a sprawling enclosure designed to mimic the wild. 6 months ago, they'd introduced Ranger, a young male bobcat rescued near a logging site in West Virginia. His territory had been poisoned by chemical runoff, a detail Eleanor mentioned in hushed tones during a staff meeting. "We don't know what those toxins did to him," she'd warned, her arthritic hands clutching a stack of environmental reports, or to Maxine's cubs. The pair had bonded slowly, their wary glances turning to shared naps under the oak trees. No one expected a pregnancy so soon. Bobcats typically mated in late winter, with cubs arriving in May or June. By their math, Maxine shouldn't deliver until summer. But on that misty April morning, something was wrong. Lucas arrived at dawn, thermos of black coffee in hand, his boots crunching on the gravel path. He froze as he neared Maxine's enclosure. She wasn't lounging on her favorite perch or stalking the perimeter as usual. Instead, she paced restlessly in the back corner, pawing at the soft bedding in her den box. Her low, guttural growls cut through the quiet, higher-pitched and plaintive, a sound Lucas had never heard from her before. He pulled out his phone, his voice tight. "Henry, you'd better get here fast. Maxine's in distress. I think she's going into labor." Henry's reply crackled through the line, sharp with disbelief. "Labor? That's 6 weeks early." Lucas watched Maxine crouch, her sides heaving, and whispered to himself, "Hold on, girl, we're coming." The mist clung to the trees like a shroud as Dr. Henry Sullivan burst through the gate of Hillside Nature Reserve, his graying hair damp from the morning drizzle, his rumpled flannel shirt a testament to the urgency of Lucas's call. Maxine's enclosure loomed ahead, her pacing silhouette framed by the soft glow of dawn. Lucas stood outside the fence, his rugged face tight with worry, coffee thermos forgotten on the ground. "She's been at it for an hour," he said, voice low, growling, crouching. "It's happening now." Henry nodded, his jaw set. 6 weeks early. Let's pray those cubs are ready. Inside the den box, Maxine's amber eyes glinted with a mix of pain and instinct as she strained against the labor. The team gathered at a safe distance, Henry with his medical bag, Lucas gripping the fence, and Claire Donovan rushing in, her thick glasses fogging in the damp air. At 7:14 a.m., the first cub slid into the world, a wet bundle of dark fur no bigger than a child's fist. Maxine's rough tongue worked quickly, licking away the birth sac, and a tiny squeak broke the silence. Relief rippled through the group. "Good girl, Max," Lucas murmured, his breath visible in the chill. 3 more followed over the next hour, each one healthy, their spotted coats emerging as Maxine cleaned them with fierce tenderness. 4 perfect cubs nestled against her, their tiny chests rising and falling in sync. But then came the 5th. Maxine's sides heaved harder, her growls turning to sharp yowls that echoed through the reserve. At 8:32 a.m., a final cub emerged, smaller, frail, its body almost translucent like a ghost caught between worlds. It didn't move. Henry's face drained of color. "Keho ham va vom ying," he whispered, the Vietnamese phrase slipping out from a memory of a vet school exchange, before correcting himself, left palate and jaw severe. "In the wild, it's a death sentence." Lucas's voice cracked. "We have to save it." Claire pushed her glasses up, her eyes wide. "Wait, if we take it, Maxine might reject the whole litter, or turn on us. How far do we push this?" Henry's mind flashed to that fawn 20 years ago, its lifeless eyes staring up from the operating table. "I'm not watching another one die," he said, his tone final. Lucas volunteered, his bond with Maxine the strongest. He stepped into the enclosure, heart pounding like a war drum, his boots sinking into the soft earth. "Max, it's me," he said, kneeling low, palms open. Maxine's head snapped up, her ears flattening, and she lunged forward, claws flashing in the dim light. The team froze, Claire stifling a gasp. For a heartbeat, Lucas thought he'd misjudged her trust. Then Maxine stopped, inches from him, her amber gaze locked on his. She growled, a low rumble, but didn't strike. With trembling hands, he reached for the motionless cub, lifting it gently as Maxine watched, her body rigid. The sprint to the clinic was a blur. Henry barked orders, "Oxygen, warming pad, now," as they laid the cub, soon named Aspen, on the table. Its chest was still, its fragility a punch to the gut. Claire hooked up the oxygen mask, her hand shaking. "Come on, little one," she whispered. Henry pressed a stethoscope to the tiny form, then cursed. No heartbeat. He started compressions, his fingers delicate but firm, counting under his breath. 10 seconds. 20. Lucas clenched his fists, muttering, "Fight, damn it, fight!" At 30 seconds, a faint wheeze broke through. Aspen's pink mouth twitched, and its chest shuddered with a shallow breath. "We've got it!" Henry shouted, relief flooding his voice. Claire sobbed, a single tear streaking her cheek. But outside, Maxine's howls grew louder, piercing the morning like a mother's grief. Lucas glanced back through the clinic window, seeing her pace the enclosure's edge, her eyes searching. "She knows," he said, his voice thick. "She knows we took it." Henry wiped sweat from his brow, the weight of the moment sinking in. "It's alive, but it can't nurse with that defect. We've bought time, that's all." Claire looked between them, her expression torn. Did we just save a life or break a family? The cub's survival hung by a thread, a fragile victory shadowed by Maxine's cries. What cost would this miracle demand? And would Maxine forgive them for stealing her fifth child? Hit the comments. Do you think Maxine understands Lucas, or is it just instinct? Was saving Aspen worth the risk? The Hillside Nature Reserve settled into an uneasy rhythm after Aspen's fragile resurrection, but the victory was a hollow one. Inside the clinic, the tiny bobcat cub lay in an incubator, its chest rising faintly under the hum of oxygen tubes, a patchwork of hope stitched together by human hands. Every 2 hours, Claire Donovan fed it through a syringe, her thick glasses reflecting the dim glow of the warming pad as she whispered, "Stay with us, little fighter." But outside, Maxine's cries haunted the reserve, a raw, guttural sound that clawed at the team's resolve. She pressed her sleek body against the enclosure's mesh wall, her amber eyes searching the air, her tufted ears twitching toward the clinic where her fifth cub had vanished. Lucas Hayes stood watch, his rugged frame slouched against a pine tree, the scent of damp bark mixing with the bitter tang of his cold coffee. "She's not eating," he said as Dr. Henry Sullivan approached, his graying hair tucked under a faded cap. "She's ignoring the other 4, just stands there calling for Aspen." Henry's face tightened, the memory of that lifeless fawn flickering behind his eyes. "If she rejects the litter, we'll lose them all," he said, his voice gravelly. "Stress can do that to a first-time mother, especially one with her past." Claire joined them, her notebook clutched like a shield. "I've got an idea," she said, pushing her glasses up. "We could use a cloth with aspen scent, rub it on Maxine, trick her into thinking it's still here." Lucas spun on her, his eyes blazing. "Trick her? We're not playing games with her head. She's grieving, Claire. Maybe we should let Aspen go. Nature's already made its call." Henry's hands balled into fists, his knuckles whitening. "I've seen nature's call," he snapped, his voice breaking. "I watched a fawn die under my knife because I wasn't fast enough. I'm not letting that happen again." Eleanor Grayson rolled up in her wheelchair, her weathered face stern. "We're not gods, Henry," she said softly, "but we're not helpless either. If there's a chance, don't we owe it to them?" The debate fractured the team, but Maxine's worsening state forced their hand. Claire's scent trick worked for a while. Maxine sniffed the cloth, her howls softening to chirps, and she returned to her den, nudging the 4 healthy cubs closer. But the peace was fleeting. By the 3rd day, one cub, a feisty little female they'd named Ember, began to falter. Her squeaks grew weak, her spotted coat dulling as Maxine's milk dwindled under the strain. "She's not getting enough," Henry said, his stethoscope pressed to Ember's tiny chest. "We'll have to bottle feed her too." Lucas's jaw clenched. "So we save Aspen and starve the rest? What's the damn point?" That night, a storm swept over the Blue Ridge, rain lashing the reserve in sheets, thunder rumbling like a warning. Lucas was on feeding duty when Ember's breathing stopped. He bolted from the clinic into the downpour, the cub cradled in his hands, his boots slipping in the mud. "No, no, no," he shouted, pressing his fingers to her chest, rain streaming down his face, mixing with tears he didn't bother to hide. Lightning flashed, illuminating the desperation in his eyes, the same helplessness he'd felt watching loggers tear down his forest. Henry raced out, flashlight bouncing, and together they worked under the storm's roar. After 20 agonizing seconds, Ember gasped, a frail whimper escaping her. Lucas slumped against the clinic wall, sobbing, "We're breaking everything." Inside, Henry wiped rain from his face, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if I'm saving them or just chasing ghosts," he confessed to Claire, who sat silently, her glasses fogged with tears. "Maybe Lucas is right. Maybe I'm too damn stubborn." Eleanor, listening from the doorway, rolled closer. "Stubborn's what got us this far," she said. "But every choice has a cost. What's yours, Henry?" He didn't answer, staring at the incubator where Aspen slept, oblivious to the chaos his life had sparked. The team patched together a fragile balance, Aspen in the clinic, Ember on formula, Maxine teetering on the edge, but the cubs were weakening and Aspen's defect loomed like a ticking clock. Surgery was their last hope, or their final mistake. Could they risk it all again, or was this family doomed to shatter? Drop your thoughts below. Should they have let Aspen go to save the litter? Does Maxine feel grief like we do, or is it just instinct? The air in Hillside Nature Reserve buzzed with a restless tension as the fourth week dawned, the fragile truce between life and loss teetering on a knife's edge. Aspen, the ghostly fifth cub, clung to existence in his incubator, his tiny body sustained by Claire Donovan's meticulous syringe feedings, his cleft palate a cruel barrier to Maxine's milk. But the cost was mounting. Maxine's amber eyes dulled with exhaustion, her once vigorous frame thinning as she paced the enclosure, chirping for her missing cub, while her 4 healthy offspring, including the now stabilized Ember, grew weaker by the day. Dr. Henry Sullivan stood before the team, his graying hair disheveled, his voice heavy. "Surgery's our only shot," he said, tapping a scan of Aspen's malformed jaw. "Without it, he'll starve or choke, but at 4 weeks, under anesthesia, we're looking at a 40% survival rate." Claire's glasses fogged as she clutched her notebook, her voice trembling. "And if he survives, Maxine might still reject him. He smells like us now." Lucas Hayes, leaning against the clinic wall, his rugged hands scarred from years in the wild, snorted bitterly. "We're playing God again. Haven't we done enough damage?" Henry's eyes flashed, the ghost of that fawn stirring in his chest. "I'm not burying another one, Lucas. Not when I can fight." Eleanor Grayson, her wheelchair creaking as she rolled forward, cut through the fray. "It's not about playing God. It's about giving him a chance nature stole, but if we fail, we own that too." The night before the surgery was a crucible of doubt. Lucas sat by Aspen's incubator, the hum of machinery a stark contrast to the forest's whispers outside. "You've got to make it, little guy," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I've lost too much already. Don't you dare give up." Henry, alone in his office, pulled out a faded photo of his ex-wife, her parting words echoing, "You can't save them all," he whispered back. "Watch me." Claire stayed up, scribbling notes on Maxine's behavior, her tears smudging the ink. "If we lose him, it's all for nothing," she choked out, the weight of her atonement pressing down. Surgery day broke with a cruel clarity, the sky a piercing blue over the Blue Ridge. Dr. Sofia Martinez, a craniofacial specialist from Virginia Tech, arrived with her team, her calm demeanor a lifeline in the storm. 90 minutes, max," she said, arranging her tools with surgical precision. "We'll repair the palate and jaw, but he's so small every second counts." The clinic transformed into an operating theater, Aspen's frail form laid bare under the lights, his chest barely moving under the anesthesia mask. Henry monitored the vitals, his hands steady but his heart racing. Lucas and Claire watched from the sidelines, their breaths shallow, the room thick with unspoken prayers. At the 60-minute mark, disaster struck. Sophia's scalpel paused as the monitor screeched. Aspen's heart rate plummeted, his blood pressure crashing. "He's flatlining," she shouted, her calm shattering. Henry lunged for the adrenaline, his fingers fumbling, the syringe nearly slipping from his sweat-slicked grip. "Not now, not now," he roared, injecting the dose as Sophia pressed on the cub's chest. Outside, Maxine's howl tore through the reserve, a primal scream that rattled the windows, as if she felt her cub slipping away. 10 seconds stretched into eternity, then a faint beep. "We've got him," Sophia exhaled, her hands resuming their delicate dance. "Perfect repair," she said at the end, voice steady again. "He's a fighter." But the battle wasn't over. Hours later, they brought Aspen back to the enclosure's edge, his scent masked by antiseptic and human touch. Maxine surged forward, slamming against the mesh, her claws raking the metal with a screech that chilled the blood. She didn't recognize him. Lucas dropped to his knees, tears streaming. "We saved him and we lost her," Claire sobbed, clutching her glasses. Henry, desperation clawing at him, yelled, "Get her blanket now!" They rubbed Maxine's scent onto Aspen, placing him near the fence. The air hung heavy as she sniffed, her growls fading to a soft chirp. A flicker of recognition, or just a trick of hope? The cub lived, but the family teetered on ruin. Had they crossed a line no one could uncross? Hit the comments. Did Maxine know Aspen through that scent, or was it wishful thinking? Is this a triumph of science, or a hubris we'll regret? The sun rose over Hillside Nature Reserve with a quiet promise, its golden rays slicing through the Blue Ridge mist to bathe Maxine's enclosure in a soft glow. Aspen, the frail cub who danced with death, lay cradled in an incubator just outside the fence, his patched-up jaw a testament to human grit and fragile miracles. The surgery had saved him, but the rift it carved between him and Maxine lingered like a wound that would. Dr. Henry Sullivan watched from the clinic steps, his graying hair catching the light, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline of that fateful hour. "He's breathing steady," he said, voice hoarse, "but it's not over yet." Maxine's amber eyes tracked every move, her tufted ears twitching as she sniffed the air, the blanket's scent a fragile bridge to her lost cub. Lucas Hayes, his rugged frame slumped beside the enclosure, had barely slept, his scarred hands raw from clutching the fence through the night. "She's trying," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. "But she's confused, and the others are paying for it." The 4 healthy cubs, Ember among them, stumbled clumsily in the den, their once vibrant play dulled by Maxine's distraction. Claire Donovan suggested a cautious reunion, her glasses fogged with morning dew and unshed tears. "Supervised visits," she said, clutching her notebook. "If she accepts him, it might pull her back." The first attempt was a heart-stopping gamble. Lucas carried Aspen in a towel, his boots crunching softly as he entered the enclosure. Maxine rose, her muscles tensing, and for a moment Henry braced for a fight. But she didn't lunge. She sniffed, her whiskers quivering, then licked Aspen's tiny head with a tenderness that broke Claire's composure. "It's a miracle," she whispered, tears streaking her face. The healthy cubs toddled over, curious and rough, and Ember's playful pounce drew a sharp squeak from Aspen. Maxine growled low, nudging Ember away with a paw, her instincts shifting to shield the weakest. "She's learning," Lucas marveled, his eyes wet. "She knows he's different." Days turned to weeks, and a fragile rhythm emerged. Mornings and evenings, Aspen nestled with Maxine and his siblings, his small form gaining strength from their warmth. Midday, he returned to the clinic for bottle feeds, his repaired palate still too weak for full nursing. One misty dawn, as the forest sang with birds, Aspen latched onto Maxine's side, drawing a few precious drops of milk, a victory that hit Henry like a thunderbolt. He sank to the grass, sobbing, "I did it, little fawn. I did it." Lucas clapped his shoulder, his own tears silent, while Claire captured the moment on her phone, her voice shaking. "This is why we fight." But the story didn't end in the enclosure. Eleanor Grayson, her wheelchair creaking as she reviewed chemical reports from the logging site, dropped a bombshell. "Aspen's defect, it's tied to toxins from that runoff," she said, her weathered face grim. "We saved him, but how many others never had a chance?" The revelation fueled a documentary, Maxine's Fight, produced by Claire's cousin. Aired across America, it showed Maxine's howls, Aspen's surgery, and the team's tears, sparking a flood of donations that expanded Hillside's clinic. Yet it ignited debate. Are we fixing nature or just our guilt? One critic sneered online. "She's a prisoner now, not a bobcat," another wrote, pointing to Maxine's growing fame. By the 3-month mark, Aspen bounded after his siblings, smaller but fierce, his spotted coat gleaming as he scaled logs and pounced on toys. Maxine watched, her patience stretched but unbroken, her amber gaze a mix of pride and something distant, a wildness no fence could tame. One evening, as twilight painted the reserve in purples and golds, Lucas and Henry stood by the enclosure. The Bobcat family curled in a contented pile. "We gave them a shot," Lucas said, his voice soft. "But are they free?" Henry's eyes lingered on Maxine. "We tipped the scales, the rest is theirs." Maxine blinked slowly at them, a feline gesture of trust, but her stare drifted to the horizon, a forest she'd never roam. Was this salvation or a gilded cage? Tell us below, how far should we go to save one life? Is Maxine happy at Hillside, or does she deserve the wild? Your thoughts could shape the next chapter of their story.